everyone, and welcome to ProWritingAid 101 for business writers. I'm Micah McGuire, ProWritingAid's B2B Digital Marketing Manager, and today I am here with Tom Wilde, our Head of Client Solutions. It is wonderful to see you all here today. We are glad to have you here with us for this training, and we'll go ahead and start off with a little bit of an agenda for today. So today's session is going to be just a touch different than usual. We're actually going to be starting off in our web editor briefly, just to give you guys a good idea of what the settings pane looks like. And then we're actually going to be jumping over to our Chrome extension to discuss the real-time checker and the goal sidebar. From there, we'll be talking about some of the more useful reports for business writers, including the summary report, the readability report, the style report, and the sticky sentences report. And then after that, if we have time, we're also going to be touching on some of our favorite tools for business writers, including the snippets tool and our style guide. But as always, we want this session to be driven by what you guys would like to know. So if you have questions at any point during the demonstration, please feel free to put them in the chat and we will make sure to get those answered for you. If you have a question that was not able to be answered during the Q&A, please feel free to email it to hello@prowritingaid.com. Again, that is HELLO@prowritingaid.com. Just put in the subject line that you were part of our ProWritingAid 101 for business writers, and we will make sure to get back to you as soon as possible. All right, Tom, so I suppose we can go ahead and get started.
Yeah, it sounds like it, Micah. Thanks for that. And welcome to everybody who's joining us, wherever you are. I'm hoping that today's session is going to be just as useful if you're a new first-time user of ProWritingAid or whether you're a regular user. We see ProWritingAid as being a little bit like a second pair of digital eyes, if you like the editor on your shoulder. And what we're going to do today is take you through, like Micah said, some of the reports, some of our favorite features within the tool. But we do love it to be interactive. This is your opportunity to ask questions and get the most out of the tool. And we do realize ProWritingAid is a rich tool. There's a lot to it. It can be daunting when you're first using it. So if there are elements you're not quite sure about, you need help getting up and running, just drop a question in the Q&A. Okay, so let me share my screen. And as Micah said, the first thing we're going to show you is the web editor that sits on our website. That's just to show you where you can access your settings. So you can see, this is what ProWritingAid looks like. This is the UI of the core tool. This is what you would see in any integration that you're using. So whether you're using ProWritingAid within Microsoft Word add-in, the Google Docs add-on, or one of our browser extensions, which we're going to jump to in a minute. So I've got a document open here. It's an email I've written to a client, and you can see that I've got a bunch of buttons across the top here, all different reports that I can run. But before we get into that, just a word on the settings, and you can see I've got a settings tab here. In the settings, I can set my language type. So what kind of English, which variation of English am I using? Is it US, UK, Australian, or Canadian English? Also, what kind of document am I writing? So is it style? Is it business writing? Is it academic writing? Is it technical writing? And I can even dig deeper and go into the report, the document type as well. So you can see I've got business writing and I've got report here. Actually, let's change that to email, a sales email, which is more specific to the document type I've got on the screen. Now, as I said, you can change these settings within any of the integrations. But it's good to see what it looks like within the web editor. Now let's jump into the Chrome extension. So I'm going to show you the same email, but I'm going to show you in a Gmail window. And you can see I've got the Chrome extension installed up here. As I turn it on, so as I enable it, take a look at the screen. So the first thing that happens is colored underlines appear on the screen, and that's our real-time checker working in the background, continually working in the background, searching for possible improvements, maybe mistakes you've made, might be spelling mistakes, maybe grammar issues, style, passive voice issues. They'll all be caught. And as I hover over any of these underlines, a pop-up appears to tell me what the issue is or what the possible improvement is. And throughout today's session, we're going to be working through a few examples of this, because this pop-up and the functionality you'll see throughout the tool. Now, at the very basic level, so the really kind of high level first pass, the simplest thing to do, and the reason I want to show you this in the Chrome extension is because the Chrome extension is so useful. It's our most used integration by our users. It works pretty much everywhere. Any web apps you've got, it will work within them, within the text fields within those. So, yeah, sorry, Mike.
I just wanted to add on that you'll hear us refer to this as a Chrome extension, but we do also have browser extensions available for Firefox, Safari, and Microsoft Edge. I believe we support every browser except for Internet Explorer at this point. So all of these features are going to look very, very similar across all of these browser extensions.
Yeah, that's right. And it's a core feature of the UI is that it looks the same. We make it look the same, give it the same look and feel. Now, as I said, you can just make some changes in the document at a really high level. And to do that, you can simply hover over either of the suggestions, select the one that you think is correct. If I click here, it will simply implement it and move me to the next issue. You might see that I can also ignore an issue. So if I don't think that's right, I can ignore it. I can disable the rule, but we wouldn't recommend it. So I'm going to just work through a few of these right now. And I'm not going to leave a review. Apologies for that, for ProWritingAid. Just bear with me. And here, so I've got another thing here. This is actually a deprecated term. So this is something I've added to my term base. If we get a chance, I'll show you this in a bit more detail later on. It's a bit like building my own personal dictionary. So this is a rule I've added.
And Tom, also, just to quickly touch on the difference between disabling rules versus ignoring rules. Ignoring a suggestion actually means that that suggestion will be consistently ignored throughout the document, which means you don't have to go back and keep hitting ignore again and again. But disabling the rule means that it is going to disable it across all of your documentation. And that's something that is not currently able to be turned back on from a user standpoint. You would have to contact our support team. So that's why you'll hear us mostly recommend simply ignoring suggestions, because it's still the same function, just means that you're not totally disabling your rule across the program.
Yeah, great point. Good pick up, Micah. Thanks for that. Okay, I'm going to stop making these changes and I'm going to go a step further and actually open the editor interface. Now I can do that simply here by clicking on this little target symbol. And what that does is opens a little side panel, which you'll see in any of our integrations. And this side panel gives me a whole range of metrics to do with how I'm performing in my document, but also the improvements. So the changes I was just making to the document, I can navigate those in the document itself, or I can make those changes here in this side panel. It's exactly the same. It's just a user preference point. Okay, so here we go. Another readability point. Do you really need to use the term all of, or can we just take it out, make the processing of information simpler for your reader? So we'll do that, move on to the next point. Right, here we've got started doing.
And Tom, do you want to show the filtering that's available within the sidebar as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can see at the moment, I'm just going through everything that I've got in my document. But if I want to focus on a specific element, I can do that with this filter. So I can choose, do I want to just look at grammar issues? Or do I want to include passive voice issues? Or all of them? So again, the great flexibility in there for a user, from a user's perspective. Now you remember, yeah, sorry, Micah.
Just bringing to everyone's attention that I believe those also show up, the filters also show up in the real-time checker as well, correct?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, you can see those in the real-time checker. Okay, so let me just move on from these. I want to bring us back a second to the document setting. Remember I set the document type to an email, and if I click on my goals here, you'll see that the document type and these goals, you'll see that these goals are specific to that document type. So here, it's giving me a range of metrics to do with emails. What is my grammar, spelling, and style looking like in this document? and it's rating the document against the benchmarked average. So here, our suggested target for grammar, spelling, and style is 80%. But in my document, I'm only reaching 42%, which is why it's in this kind of orange color. So I'm below target. Likewise, down here with my sentence length should be between 11 and 18 words on average, words per sentence. And I'm actually hitting 22.8 words per sentence. So I'm above target there. So these are starting to build an idea of which elements and which reports I might want to run, but which elements of the document I need to focus on in a bit more detail. Now I mentioned—
And as you work—
Yeah, go Micah. Yeah.
It's as you work through the document as well, you'll also see those scores begin to change. So as you accept, let's say you have a few spelling errors that need to be corrected, you'll notice that your spelling score is going to go up in that goals toolbar. This is true across the app. Once we get into our larger reports toolbar that Tom kind of showed you with our web editor, you'll see that that's also reflected in, say, our summary report as well.
Yeah, and in fact, I'm just going to change this settings. It should be email, a sales email rather than standard email. And you'll see there are some differences there. Here it's looking at things like customer focus score, what we call we-you linkers. So how are you linking what you're telling the customer to their specific requirements? Also positivity. And I think we've got a spam phrase count metric here. So you'll see the metrics differ for every document type you select. And like Micah said, you'll see these change. So we're currently at 42% for grammar, spelling, and style. But as I start to make some of these changes, accept some of these changes, or even ignore some of these changes, you'll see the score start to improve. So we're up to 43% now. We'll move up to 44%, I would imagine, in a second. And so, yeah, there we go, and so on. So there's a lot of rich data within the real-time checking tool that can help you start to build a very clear picture of where your weaknesses are. And that's one of the hardest things with business writing. Many of us aren't employed as writers per se. We've got technical skills elsewhere. So it can be very difficult to put your finger on exactly what you should focus on to improve the standard of your communication. That's what ProWritingAid does for you. It understands, it identifies your weakest areas and your strongest areas too, but it focuses on your weakest areas and helps you improve them. Okay, one thing I haven't shown you, and I'm going to do this as the last thing before I dive into some of those deeper reports, is the learning that's built into ProWritingAid. So it's really important that it's not just seen as it's not just a one-stop shop, okay? It's not just about changing your document that's on the screen. It's focusing on building your skills and capability. What I mean by that is, if you see this little information icon here, by clicking on that, so here we've got an example of the passive voice, and it's telling us actually, try using the active voice. Your reader will thank you for it, because you're making the transfer of information from the page to the reader's brain simpler if you use the active voice. If I don't understand what the difference between the passive and the active voice is, which is totally reasonable, click on that symbol and it'll open a pop-up which will teach you a little bit more about the passive and the active voice. And in the case of this particular learning interaction, it includes an embedded video that will explain a bit more and help reinforce some of that learning. So the idea is we're building or helping to build your skills and capabilities in the long term. We are making you a better writer or helping you become a better writer over time. Right. What I want to do now is open the full editor, because like I said, this is kind of a great, really powerful, high level view of your document. And it can be really helpful to make some incremental changes. But if we want to get into greater detail, open the full editor and we can run some of those other reports that you saw in the web editor at the beginning. Take a second to do that. Okay, there we go. So you recognize the user interface that we saw before. Here again is the real-time checker already working. Let's just turn that off a second. And I'm going to run some of these reports, starting with the summary. And the reason I'm starting with the summary report is because it, again, like goals, it's going to show you which are the areas to focus on for the biggest improvements. Let's have a look.
And another great part of the summary tool is that if you're kind of getting acquainted with ProWritingAid, it's a great place to start because generally we all have our own writing style and we all have our own strengths and weaknesses. What the summary report is going to do for you is show you the places that you will probably need to make the most improvements upon. So therefore, we don't recommend running all 19 plus reports that we have. You would be here hours on any one given document. Instead, what we find is most of our business users have between about 3 to 5 different reports that they run regularly. The great way to get acquainted with which ones will probably be in your top 3 to 5 is through the summary report, because you'll find that as time goes on, you'll see, oh, hey, I'm consistently kind of needing a boost with my readability. I consistently need some help maybe on sentence length. And you'll come to a point where maybe you don't even need to run the summary report because you're so consistent with the reports that you need to run that you can just go straight to those reports, check those, and congratulations, your document's done as soon as those reports have been run and those changes have been made. So this is a great way to kind of start off with the tool. It's kind of a good set of training wheels.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And at ProWritingAid, we've all got our favorite report sets. You can even combine your reports, so you can even set your report settings under a combo report. I'll show you a little bit later on. But let's dig into a little bit more detail. Now, in the goals sidebar, you remember we saw an overall score for grammar, spelling, and style. Here we separate them out, and they are always your headline scores. So grammar, style, and spelling will always be at the top of the summary report. And we can see I've got some work to do there. Below that, we group together all the variables where I'm doing well. So where my document's looking good. And if I want to dig into a bit more detail, right, because the summary report is a rich piece of information, there's a lot to it. We recommend, getting to know it. Again, getting to know your favorite parts. I can do that either by scrolling down through the document, or I just click on one of these. So here we go straight down to the readability grade, where it confirms what my performance is like at the moment, but also uses some really clear illustrations just to show me what some of the issues might be or what I should be looking out for. So in this case, it's grading my paragraph level readability. And I can see that although in general, my readability is pretty good, still around about 10% of my paragraphs are what's classified as very difficult to read. So I might want to run that readability report, and we'll go and do that in a second. Let's just go back to the top. Below all these gradings that I'm doing well in, you'll see we group together the areas where my document needs more work. And again, I can click on any of those to go into a bit more detail. You'll see this includes grammar, spelling, and style because we know those things, but it includes things like sentence length. I've got too much business jargon. And my glue index. Remember glue index because we're going to come to that as one of the sample reports. It's one of my favorites. Okay. So I'm already starting to build a picture. What I'm going to do, I'm going to show you that readability report. I think that's useful. And even though I'm doing quite well in readability, I'm going to dive into style. Then we're going to look at sticky sentence or glue index, sorry. And if we've got time, we'll do another one as well. So let's do readability. So here's the readability report. I click on it. What it's doing is analyzing each paragraph and the readability of each paragraph. Now, you're probably all very familiar with readability ratings. There are many different measures out there. We use the FleshReadingAid and the FleshReadingAid grade to analyze documents at ProWritingAid. And you can see, as I go through paragraph by paragraph, it's giving me a FleshReadingAid score. How it judges that is by looking at the length of your sentence, but also the complexity of the words in the sentence. Typically, the number of syllables, the average number of syllables per word. So I can see in this document that I've got one very difficult to read paragraph, and I can navigate to that. It's right here. It gives me a FleshReadingAid score, 39, just below 40. Really, that should be up closer to 60, preferably 70. So I know that this is a paragraph that needs some help. Now, I can either go in and start making some changes to that. I can read it. I can do a manual edit, run the report again. And there are probably some very obvious things in there I could do. Or I can actually run some of the other reports, look at the document as a whole, and start to pull apart little bits and pieces, start to improve make incremental improvements across the whole document.
And one of the things to keep in mind with these readability scores too is the Flesch Reading E score and the Flesch Kincaid grade are actually going to kind of track together. So what that Flesch Kincaid grade is actually referring to is a grade level of reading. And basically we're not saying here that you're going to try to make everything you write appeal to middle schoolers, because generally the accepted grade is between 6th and 10th grade, but it's just the fact that good writing that is easy to read and is easy on your reader tends to fall within that middle grade, very early high school grade level. So that's where you'll see that 6 to 10 grade pop into place.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we've touched on readability report. Let's go back to the STAR report now and run that. STAR report is slightly different because, like the real-time checker, it will actually offer suggestions. So it's the AI is working in the background, the machine learning is working in the background, analyzing the text and offering suggestions. Now, it categorizes those in different areas. So we've got a bunch of readability enhancements. And what I want to do is focus on, well, let's have a look. So I can navigate to any of them here. So we've got one, the majority of. Let's navigate to that. Simply saying, hey, try using most instead of the majority of. You're saving your reader time and effort by simplifying the readability level. Okay.
And also something to keep in mind with the style report is that certain reports, like let's say spelling and grammar, tend to be very, very black and white. There are either spelling or grammar errors there or there are not. But in the case of style, a lot of these are going to be suggestions that you as the writer are going to have to take into account. Is this something I want to accept, or is this something that this is just the way I write? One example I give that I use is I have a tendency to split infinitives a lot of times. If I'm writing in a casual setting, then that may not be a problem for my reader. But if I'm doing something very formal, I probably need to look at that and go, okay, I probably need to move some wording around to make sure that I'm adhering to proper grammar rules here, as this is a more formal document. So all of this is something to keep in mind whenever you're working through this report, is that these are not necessarily right or wrong. This is just a matter of this may make reading easier on your audience.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, let's look at one of those examples, something that's not right or wrong, because if you remember, we were looking at this paragraph here in the readability report. I'm just going to highlight this element. Again, it's a passive voice example. Nothing wrong with a passive voice. It's not that it's incorrect, but we, as business writers, tend to overuse the passive voice. And there are reasons for that. Sometimes we don't want to name the subject of the sentence. We don't take responsibility. You'll see it used a lot in legal writing, for example. But actually, if you use the standard word order of subject, verb, object, you are much more likely to engage your reader. So here you can see it's tried to convert a passive sentence into an active sentence, and it's given you several options. I think probably we have held several meetings is the most accurate. So we're going to accept that. And we'll move on to other examples in this paragraph. Here, okay, so it's suggesting must rather than have to. So again, you could use that. I'm going to ignore it on this instance. It's not something I want to keep the have to in place. And I've just realized this is a rule that I've set up for specific clients, so we can ignore this one too. But you can see how I'm making these changes as we go along. And within the STAR report, you'll see that there are areas relating to business jargon too. So here we've got examples of things like bandwidth. Should you be using something capacity or spare capacity as a better alternative? There's lots you can do within the STAR report to help improve the readability, but help improve other areas too. So I'd really recommend that's a report you go to regularly. I just want to touch on, and I don't normally go here, but I'm going to touch on thesaurus as well, because there's, again, focusing on this paragraph here, there's a couple of things I want to pull out. If we run thesaurus, it's going to look at the vocabulary I'm using and make some suggestions for how I could possibly simplify it or change it. And the one I'm really looking at here is expeditious, because it's one of those words that tends to trip people up. It's a word that makes you stop and think, and that's not what you want your reader to do. So my thesaurus report has identified that and said, hey, here are some alternative suggestions. I'm going to select Swift here, just because I think it's a simpler word for our reader to consume. Okay, that's all I really want to do in the thesaurus report. There is another way you can access a really rich tool within ProWritingAid, and that's just by double-clicking on any word in document, and that will open our Word Explorer. There we go. So the Word Explorer opens, I've selected company, and it's identified some synonyms for company, and then I can open a much richer tool that goes into a great deal of detail. It even kind of lists collocations to do with the word I've selected. It gives me a full thesaurus entry. I can look up usual dictionary definitions, all to do with that one word. So if you are struggling, you know, that word that's on the tip of your tongue maybe, but you'd need some help, maybe just bringing a bit more variety into a vocabulary. The thesaurus report, but also the Word Explorer, really useful resources.
And you'll find within that Word Explorer, usually the thesaurus tool or the co-location tool is going to be a huge help, because what that co-location tool is doing is going to put forward words that are common near another word. So let's say you were trying to remember something that is connected to the word fire. And let's say you've drawn a total blank and you can't remember, you know, firewood, for example. In that case, the co-location dictionary might bring up, you know, hey, this is usually a noun that is around fire whenever it's used in different sentences. So it's a great way to jog your memory for those tip of the tongue moments.
Great, thanks, Micah. Do you know, I'm just going to run, this is, apologies if I'm going a little bit off topic, but I've also realized there's a really useful report here that we haven't mentioned yet, but it's a sentence length report. And that's going to simply pick out the sentences, again, not just the words, but the actual full sentence that could possibly trip up your reader. I really like this. It's really, really simple. All it does is chronologically, so in sentence order, give you the length of each sentence in turn. So you can see where some of your longest sentences are. I can see, so here, this 31-word sentence. That is the kind of sentence that my reader is going to get to the end of and have to go all the way back to the beginning to remind themselves what the actual sentence was about. In this case, let's take a look at this sentence. It's not going to rewrite it for me, but it's a great flag that I need to do something about it. So maybe, sorry, go on, Micah.
It's just, I'm wondering if that might be a good candidate for our sticky sentences report with as long as it is.
Well, yeah, it's a good question, actually. I think there's another sticky sentence that I'm going to flag with the sticky sentences report. What I'm going to do with this particular report is or this particular sentence, sorry, and let me highlight it again, is just take a look at it and manually change it. So our digital transformation team has been acting as the intermediary between, and then we just list a whole bunch of teams. What we need to do is shorten that sentence or cut it down into 2 or more sentences. Now, there are thousands of ways you could do that. So the AI isn't going to work and list hundreds and thousands of different suggestions. That's up to you. But if it were me, I would probably simply change it to something like the intermediary between various teams and the C-suite. So there. Okay. And that's shorten that paragraph. Let's just take a look now at the readability rating of that paragraph. Okay, so remember, this was rated as a very difficult to read paragraph. Now, so I think it was just under 40. Now it's at 53.7 on the Flesch Reading E-score. So we're already starting to make quite significant improvements in the readability of our document, paragraph at a time. Okay, Micah, you mentioned sticky sentences report. Let's go straight into that because, as I said, it's one of my favorites. Now, sticky sentences, it measures every sentence and gives you a score for your glue index. Now, the glue index is based on the percentage of the sentence that is made up of glue words. And glue words are the 200 most commonly used words in the English language. They are typically articles, prepositions. They're the words that glue together the working words. They don't on their own give you much context. And we know through our analysis at ProWritingAid that if a sentence has more than 40% of its words as glue words, it's a great indicator that you're probably waffling. You could probably say what you'd want to say with far fewer words. So let's run the sticky sentence report. And it's going to measure sticky and semi-sticky sentences. So sticky are those that are, like I said, more than 40% glue words. Semi-sticky sentences, I think, around more than 50%, more than 20% glue words. And you can see it's found 2. Let's go to the first. So here, 12 of these 17 words are glue words. There's a really high proportion of the words. And you can see them listed. Just, wanted, to, back, about, the, around, last, or so. And on their own, they don't give you much context at all. So this is the first sentence in your email. And already you're causing your reader problems. You're delaying them. You're not delivering the information as quickly, cleanly, and efficiently as you could. You might simply want to change that to something along the lines of just circling back, or just wanted to touch base on the project. It's a really good advice note, just highlighting and say, hey, stop, think about rewriting this. It's going to benefit your reader if you do. As I said,
And remember,
yeah, sorry, go on, Micah.
like rewriting long sentences, there's no one good way to rewrite a sticky sentence. If you give 100 different writers the same sticky sentence, you're probably going to get 100 different ways to rewrite it back. So all you're using this tool for is just a measurement to see, okay, hey, have I gotten improvement on that sentence? You know, sometimes there are cases where you may even only be able to take a sticky sentence to a semi-sticky sentence. That's okay. That's improvement. It's all about the small gains. It's all about making percent improvements, because that's really what writing is about. It is not a basically game of mastery. It is a game of small improvements. I think, there was the football coach who once said football is a game of inches. Writing's very much the same way.
Yeah, I couldn't have put it better myself. Exactly that. Okay, so I think at this point, we've taken you through most of the reports that we want to show you. I think we've probably got time to just dive very quickly into one more. It will take a few seconds to run. It's all repeats, and this shows you, this looks for patterns in your writing. That's great, because the human eye is very bad at seeing patterns compared to computers. And so this looks at where you're using multi-word phrases frequently throughout the document. Don't worry too much about all the colors. If I look here in the sidebar, I can see the so the 2-word and the 3-word phrases I'm using frequently. Now, I'm only using to move forward twice, but if that's in a short document, or if let's say I'm using it 7 or 8 times, that's going to become come across as very, very repetitive. So again, great way of highlighting things that you can improve. I can navigate through each of these, and it will even suggest possible alternatives. So again, it's just trying to change the vocabulary up a bit, bring a bit more variety. And I could select one of these if I think it's appropriate. It's even going to list which single words I'm using the most as well, so I can see that too. Nothing to worry about really here. But again, if you did see something that stands out as being very repetitive, this report is going to find it.
And it's a good way to also find crutch words. We all have words that we rely upon because we usually write the way we speak. So if we have certain words that we rely on when we're speaking, then you'll likely see them pop up in your writing, and that will usually pop up here within this all repeats report.
That's right. Okay, so let's close these reports. We'll close the editor. It'll take us back to our document, and you'll see it's made the changes. So it's applied the changes we made in the web editor. That's all done while you're using, or while you're in using another web app. What I want to do now is just go quickly into some of the other settings that business users find most useful. And to do that, we're going to go back into the web editor and a few of the other controls that you can access from here. Just bear with me as I do that. So we're going to look at style guides. We're going to look at snippets, and we're going to look at how to manage your team as well. Let's start with snippets. Snippets are our text expansion tool. So if you have chunks of text, maybe sentences or paragraphs that you use repeatedly, and you have or would benefit from having a kind of template library, this is the place to use them or create them. You can create snippets for yourself. You can also, if you're part of a team or you have a team license, you can create snippets for your team. So we use them for things like our company address. There we go. I've got my company address written here. I've got my shortcut here. So if I simply go back into that document, just ignore the body of the text here. I start typing the shortcut, company address. Oh, it would help if I could spell it correctly. There it is. And it just drops the address in. Now imagine how useful that is if you've got, as I do, long emails that are very repetitive in nature. Maybe you're sending to new clients, and you can store those emails as a snippet and just drop them into the template as and when you need them.
And also useful to remember that the snippets tool is also rich text. So if you have links, formatting, anything like that that you need to include, you can always have that there, and it will populate for any rich text box that you have used it in. So this works across our Chrome extension, this works across our web editor, this works across our tool in Word, all of our different integrations and extensions. So you have that available, and as long as the text box that you are inserting it into is rich text, all of your formatting will remain the same as well.
Absolutely, thanks for that, Micah. Okay, Style Guide. So I'm just noticing that time is galloping on. Let's have a quick look at Style Guide. Style Guide is a really key customization tool for business users. It allows you to automate your style guide or your tone of voice guide. Obviously, guides vary from organization to organization, and the style guide tool allows you to automate both the simple but also the very complex, and we can help with this. So it is a service we provide. If you want us to automate your guide for you, we can do that. Let's take an example. I'm going to go kind of middle of the road, one that's kind of not one of the easiest rules, but it's also certainly by no means one of the hardest.
And as Tom is working through this, I'm also going to put a couple of our articles into the chat. One is going to be on creating simple style guide rules. It's kind of our Style Guide 101 article. And then the other is going to be on more advanced rules. So that's going to get into some of the trickier things like, goodness gracious, tokenization, all of that good stuff that goes into our style guide.
Yeah, okay, thanks for that, Micah. That'd be useful to do. So you can see where I'm creating a style guide rule, and I can do that simply by clicking up here. Let me just get rid of this. So I can click on this little plus here, and it allows me to create a new rule just by completing these 4 fields. Let me show you what an example of one completed one looks like. And I like this because it focuses on a word that in the UK would say it's a Marmite word, which means you either love it or you hate it. A lot of people dislike the word impactful, and they think actually you could use better words to describe what you're meaning. So one of our customers asked us to create a rule that tackled this. We started by just creating an example wrong sentence. So how is this term that we want to kind of highlight, how is it typically used? So here's an example wrong sentence. It's incredibly impactful. We then create the match. So we're telling the machine how to identify the match, the word that we're looking for. So we've got the word impactful, but we've preceded it with brackets with RB and a tilde in there. What does that do? So we're getting into what's called POS tagging, so parts of speech tagging, which is a term that linguists use for the codes that they allocate to different parts of speech. RB stands for adverb. So incredibly is an adverb. So here we're saying, look for the word impactful, but with any adverb before it. Now, the reason we put it in brackets and use this tilde is because we're saying it's optional. So if there is an adverb before impactful, then include that in the match. If there is no adverb before impactful, we still want you to match impactful. Okay, it doesn't matter if the adverb's there, include it. If it's not, still identify the match. The replacement. Here we're offering 5 different replacements. So significant, relevant, inspiring, influential, and effective. Generally, one of those words is a better word to use than impactful. The reason we're using the @ symbol here is because that's telling the machine to separate each into its own clickable entity on the pop-up, as you'll see in a second. Finally, we create a message, so a message for the user explaining why this has been identified, why it's been highlighted. And this is going to work in exactly the same way as the other pop-ups you've seen, identifying grammar, spelling typos, the rest of it that you saw in the web editor and a Chrome extension. So I've got my rule. I can test it. If it's green, that's a good sign. That means the logic behind it works. If it's red, there's an issue, and it will highlight what the issue is. Then I can save it. And before I do that, I'm just going to copy this, because I'm now going to go back into the Chrome extension, into this email. Just add the sentence there. And you can see it's immediately highlighted because the real-time checker is working constantly in the background. As I hover, the message that I wrote appears. And remember, we separated 5 entities, 5 suggestions using the @ symbol. Well, here's why we use that, because there we can click on each individually. Which is most useful? Well, I can choose whichever I like. We can also test the fact that without incredibly, it's still highlighting the match. There we go. As I said, style guide rules can be really, really simple. They're really great for branding names or brand names. You know, if you're the University of Pennsylvania and people keep writing Pennsylvania University, and you think that's not the brand name, you can tackle something like that by creating a very, very simple rule. You can also create really complex rules, and here's an example of a relatively complex one, using those parts of speech tags. And in this case, it's identifying a missing Oxford comma. We haven't got time to go into that detail today, but like Micah said, she's posted, I think, a couple of links to some articles on creating style guide rules, and we will look to running a separate session on this.
And guys, also feel free at any time, if you have a rule that you're interested in seeing to see how it might be done, consider sending it into our support, because we're always looking for, like we said, we're looking to do another session specifically on style guide rules. So we would love to have some rules that we could illustrate to you guys how to code those. So
yeah, and I'm smiling, Micah, because our NLP team, they love a challenge. So, you know, if you're stuck with something and how to automate a particular rule you've got, send it in. We'll give it to our NLP team, and this is the kind of stuff they thrive on.
Yeah, it's like brain teasers for them. They love this sort of thing.
Absolutely. Okay, finally, what I just quickly wanted to highlight was our team user management page. So if you have a team, and let me just scroll all the way up to the top here. If you have a ProWritingAid team license, you will be familiar with this. You can have all of your licenses listed here, all of your users listed. You can allocate administrators. And once you're an administrator, you can manage your team licenses. You can remove users. So if you've got team members who are moving out of your team, you can remove their license and reassign it to other users. You can set users as administrators or as users. You can even set their license level as well. So everything's there that you should need to be able to administer your team effectively. And with that, we're pretty much at the end of everything I wanted to show you today. Micah, anything I've missed?
Yeah, Tom just wanted to tackle on how you would access this team management page, just really quickly in case some users haven't used the tool too much.
Sure, yeah, great point. So when you log into ProWritingAid, navigate to your profile page or any of the pages within your account, and you'll see this little hamburger menu here. And from here, you can get into, like I said, teams, style guides, snippets. Those you'll all recognize from tonight's session. So it should be relatively straightforward.
Okay. Well, Tom, I think we just have a couple of questions that have popped up in the Q&A. So
right.
Let's see if you want to take a look and see if there are a couple that we want to go over.
One thing, while you're doing that, Mike, I realized I did mention early on about term bases. And for team users, team license holders, we have a term base function within ProWritingAid that allows you to build your custom team dictionary. If that's something of interest, again, contact our support team and we can help. There are instructions on the site to help you to do that. It's something you can access, once again, from anywhere from this hamburger menu. It's a really simple operation, just involves uploading a CSV template and allows you to set preferred terms so that any brand names, any bespoke terms that you want, that so that they aren't flagged by the spell checker. That's a great way to handle those. Sorry, Micah.
Tommy, it's just we may have frozen for just a moment for a couple of our users. Give it just a second. Okay, guys, are we back online? Does everything look good? If you could just pop that in the chat if everything is still working on your end. And Tom, I think we've got one that is covering a little bit about, I believe, our Microsoft Office integrations. So we have one user that their ProWritingAid extension is only appearing in their Word doc and not in their email. I'm assuming that you're using Outlook in this case.
Yeah, it sounds like it, Micah, and it sounds to me, my recommendation would be to go into options through the menu in Outlook and go to your add-ins. It sounds like ProWritingAid may not be enabled as an add-in. Okay. It can sometimes be enabled in Word and not in Outlook for various reasons. You can also just try downloading the most up-to-date version from our website. And you can do that by going to our homepage. Let me just show you. So from the bottom of our homepage, you'll see integrations listed. Go to Microsoft Office and download there. If for whatever reason, it should automatically update, so you should have the most up-to-date version, but try re-downloading it if it's not appearing in Outlook for whatever reason.
And actually, in this case, I think this is a user using Google. So we unfortunately do not support, say, like third-party mail apps. So let's say, for example, on Mac, I know that a lot of folks use Airmail. We don't support checking in those apps as of yet. But if you are using our browser extensions and using, say, Gmail within the web browser, it should perform all of that checking for you, just like Tom showed in the document today at the demo. So I hope that answers your question. Again, like I said, feel free to send in a question to our support at hello@prowritingaid.com if that did not quite get to it. Tom, we've got another attendee that is referring to having a comma indicator that is popping up that ProWritingAid indicates that the comma needs to be in, then says that the comma should be removed. So I believe that is something that needs to be reported to our NLP team, correct?
Right, absolutely. So this is one of our challenges. So English language is a wonderful, rich language, as we know, and the rules aren't always consistent. We're constantly, as an NLP team, we're constantly working to improve the accuracy and the recall of the tool. But there will be, as with any grammar and spell checker, false positives that appear from time to time. Now, the way to deal with those, again, I'm just going to share my screen. Sorry for this continual swapping backwards and forwards. But if I go in, let's just run the real-time checker and bring up a highlighted term. So here we go. There. Now, if I go to ignore, it gives me the option to report incorrect. If I click on that, it will send a message to our NLP team that you as a user have identified a problem with the logic or the rule that is powering that particular suggestion. So if there's something missing there, if you think there's something incorrect, please do report it as incorrect. We will get around to it. It will help us improve ProWritingAid, and we really rely on our users to do that. So yeah, I hope that helps.
We have one more question. I'm hoping to get a little bit more information just so I can make sure that we're answering appropriately. It's talking a little bit about double spaces with periods. So we'll give it just a moment.
Okay.
In the meantime, if anyone else has any questions, please feel free to go ahead and pop those in the Q&A, and we will be happy to answer them.
Yeah, and if you haven't got those questions tonight, after the call, over the next couple of weeks, if you're a free user or if you're trialing ProWritingAid Premium or you have a premium license, do test out some of the stuff we've been showing you and let us know how you get on. Let us know if you've got any questions, anything you get stuck with.
And also, guys, I do just want to briefly mention we currently have a user research project that's going on with our business writers. So we are getting some feedback on just what your experience has been with ProWritingAid. So I'm going to share a quick link in the chat to a type form that we are working on. I promise it takes less than 5 minutes. I know Typeform says it takes about 7, but all of the users who have completed it so far have completed it in about 4. But I'm just going to pop that in the chat, and if you guys please take a look at that and feel free to share your opinions. This is just, we're trying to make sure that we have improved the tool as much as we can for you guys as far as our business customers go, and we really want to hear your opinions on it. So again, that will be in the chat. That link is there. And let's see.
Yeah, and I think Daniel's just put his question back in.
Yes, there we go. So that, Daniel, in this case, that sounds like a rule that you might want to disable if you want to retain those double spaces. The question is actually regarding double spaces after periods, and I know a lot of old school writers like to use double spaces. I think accepted under certain style guides like Chicago Manual, things like that, is single space, but if you want to keep it old school and go with double space, you would be free to go ahead and just disable that rule and it will not bother you anymore. Just realize that will be disabling it across all of your documents. So if you would want to have that rule re-enabled, you'd need to shoot a quick email to our support team and they would get that re-enabled on your account.
Yeah, absolutely. Nothing to add there, Mike. I thought it was, exactly the right way to do it.
So I think we are coming up on the end of the hour, so we will go ahead and just, in the interest of everybody's time, start wrapping things up. Thank you all for attending. We greatly appreciate it. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to email hello, HELLO, at ProWritingAid.com. Just throw in the subject line that you are one of our Business 101 attendees. And if you get the chance, we would love to have your opinions via that Typeform survey, and that link is shared in the chat. All right, everyone, have a great day.